Most or many of the clients that I work with would not see this as one of their characteristics initially. But once they begin to understand it, many go, wow, I didn't even realize I did that. And that's really what I want to do today, is just help you better understand what we mean when we talk about escaping to fantasy. I need to say up front that there are healthy escapes into fantasy. They're not all unhealthy. So let me just give you examples of healthy escapes into fantasy. All of us, young, old, we still go into our imaginations. And we imagine a different world. We imagine how things could be better. That can be a very healthy activity. Children love to use their imaginations. They love to make forts, have tea parties, dress up, and imagine that there's somebody else. They love to write stories of imagination. And that can be a very helpful thing for them in developing their brains, in developing their minds and their outlook on life. If you look at our culture today, we escape into watching sports. And some would even imagine when they played that sport. We escape into movies and we go on Netflix marathons. We escape into novels, books that take us to some other place. And that can be a very healthy thing as part of self-care. We also make plans for our future. We have dreams about what we would one day like to do, where we would one day like to live. And that can be a healthy thing. Sometimes, when we're struggling with very frustrating, difficult circumstances, when life is hard, when we're struggling with depression, we can escape by going back to what life was once like. And we can say, you know what, this too will pass. We will one day have things better again. And it's a way of counteracting the negative thinking, the depression that wants to take us into a more morbid point of view by saying, no, this is what we can get to again. So there is a healthy type of escape. What makes it unhealthy is when it interferes with a couple things. Number one, it interferes with the individual's ability or willingness to take responsibility for their own actions. So instead of doing anything about their problems, they escape into reality, and then that just makes it so they don't feel they need to deal with their problems. It interferes with taking responsibility. It interferes with making realistic decisions in real time, important decisions about their future, about how to resolve situations. So it's a way of avoiding. And so it has been classified as not just kind of flight or avoidance. In some cases, it's denial of the problem. In some cases, it's dissociation from yourself, from the pain, from your circumstances. So it has some very scary type of tendencies. But bottom line, it's unhealthy if it results in me not dealing with life on life's terms, by avoiding life. The other fact about it is it's relying on emotions, not facts, to make decisions. So this makes me feel good, so I will pursue that. I would choose that. Instead of looking at the facts, I will just chase the feeling. So why do people escape into this fantasy world? I think for the vast majority of people who do so, complex trauma is at the core of it. It's really what it's all about. And so you need to understand the complex trauma piece to really appreciate this style of coping. And the issue in complex trauma is a child is in circumstances that aren't fair, that are painful, that aren't safe, and they're trying to fix them, but mom and dad aren't allowing that to happen, or the teacher at school isn't allowing that to happen. So there's no way for them to solve their own problems. Doesn't matter what they try, it doesn't improve their situation. They remain in ongoing pain. And so the brain is looking for ways to escape that problem-filled life, since nothing healthy is working. And so one of the things that the brain comes up with for some people is escaping into a fantasy world. So it's all about a child's inability to resolve the difficult circumstances and the painful emotions of their life. So if you take that and then look at what this fantasy world looks like for that child, it's a world where they feel safe and happy all the time, where they don't have any fear, they don't have any pain. It's a world where everybody loves them, where everybody treats them and each other with respect. It's a world where all their needs are met. It's a world where they had power, where they weren't powerless. That's the nature of the fantasy world that they create. Now, I should say this. For people in extreme abuse, the brain has tried everything to relieve the abuse, to make the situation better, and nothing has worked. And the abuse is so severe that the brain just takes over in trying to protect the child, and it will actually dissociate from the events that are around that child so that the child can have an out-of-body experience. They can be like they're on the ceiling looking down, and that's happening to somebody else, or they can escape to some place that it is safe. But it's a subconscious thing. They're not consciously doing it. The brain just does it as a last-ditch effort to protect this child. And that begins your dissociative disorders. But let's go back to a person that escapes of their own choice to a fantasy world. What you need to understand is that their current situation is creating a lot of negative emotions and pain in their limbic brain. And so what the brain is wanting to do is find something that will overpower the negative limbic brain emotions with positive emotions instantly. And so escaping to a fantasy world is a way to take all those positive emotions and make them feel like they're happening and overpower the negative emotions of their current situation. But then it goes further. What else comes out of complex trauma is this shame piece, where I don't feel good enough. My identity says I am not lovable, I am not valuable, so I live with the pain of constant shame. I don't like myself. And in some cases, I hate myself. And so now people escape to fantasy so they don't have to live in their own skin. So they can imagine a different them where everybody loves them. And then beyond that, in complex trauma, you have many needs that aren't met. And so in the fantasy, you are getting your needs met. And so if you grow up with injustice, where things aren't fair, where one child is favored over the other, where dad doesn't care about justice, just about what he wants, then you can have revenge fantasies. You can imagine yourself being able to execute justice and vengeance on all the people who are perpetrating injustice. And then you create this environment where you're respected and loved unconditionally, where you connect with people, where you fit in and belong, and that is getting your needs met. So complex trauma introduces a whole bunch of different things that all involve painful emotions as the consequence. And so escaping to fantasy becomes a critical piece in many different ways to survive for a person in complex trauma. And so if it's about getting needs met, what can then happen in the person's mind is they begin to think that the fantasy is the solution to their problems. If only I had that, then life would be good. If only I had this, then I would be happy. And so now your fantasy is causing you to believe certain things that are probably lies. So let me take it further. Complex trauma means ongoing pain, ongoing danger, ongoing unmet needs. And so a person then escapes the fantasy on a regular basis in order to have positive emotions, in order to survive. And so they begin to get to a point where they don't want to live in the present at all because it's constantly painful. A large part of their brain is now used to explore their fantasy world, to live there, and it is more enjoyable than their present. And now they do it without even realizing they do it. And it can become their default setting. They go there now subconsciously. They go there all the time because they've been there for so long.